I'm Mangino. Welcome to the Mangino Talks Pittsburgh podcast. I've been a radio talk show host for half of my life and half of that right here in Pittsburgh. And so on my podcast, we talk about everything that matters to us all, from current events to Pittsburgh history, social issues to sports and politics to practical day-to-day life. And today I want to talk about a story that made news a couple of days ago on the issue of airline travel. People going to the airport and going through the TSA checkpoint. And the alarming number that are going through with firearms on them. And it's just a mind-boggling thing to me that there are so many people who have firearms and either think they're going to be able to get them through a TSA checkpoint, or, as they all seem to claim, not even realizing they had a firearm on them. And just this whole concept of having this happen. You have responsible gun owners, and overwhelmingly we are dominated by people like that. But there are a growing number of people who have decided to own firearms that are about as irresponsible as anybody could possibly be with them. And I want to talk about this issue, and joining us right now on Mangino Talks is Lisa Farbstein, and she is a TSA spokeswoman. Lisa, welcome to Mangino Talks. Good to have you.
Thanks. Good to be here.
This issue, you were quoted as saying that this is the making of an epidemic.
Yeah, I mean, basically, we are seeing the number of people who are bringing their guns to TSA security checkpoints just continue to increase year after year after year. An example I can give you this. So in 2018, so before the pandemic, TSA officers stopped 4,239 guns at TSA security checkpoints across the country. And last year, that was 6,542. So we saw an increase of more than 2,000 guns in a short 5-year time frame. And it just continues to grow by hundreds and hundreds every year. The first 6 months of this year so far, through June, TSA has did stop 3,251 guns. And you know what? 92% of those guns were loaded. Wow. And like you just pointed out, a good chunk of those people claim that they forgot they had their guns with them. So basically they're telling us not only did they forget they have their guns, but they forgot they had their loaded guns with them. Many of them actually have bullets in the chamber. And if you've seen the way people handle luggage, whether it's carry-on or check baggage, that, is just an accident waiting to happen. I think that people just perhaps are unaware that you can actually, yes, travel with your firearm. There's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it, and the wrong way to do it is bring it to a checkpoint, because, of course, you cannot bring a firearm. You can't carry it into the cabin of the plane. The right way to transport your gun is to, first of all, make sure it's unloaded, to pack it in a hard-sided case, lock that case, and bring it to your airline check-in counter. And you declare that basically you want to fly with your firearm, and they make sure that it is transported in the belly of the plane where nobody has access to it during the flight. That's it. Plain and simple. Not too hard. If you don't have one of those little cases, case, you can get it at a sporting goods store. You can get it at your gun shop. They don't have to be expensive. You can spend as much as you want on them, just like a car. You can get a basic model, or you can get a really fancy model. It's really all up to you.
And that may be surprising to some people, but in reality, considering how many people travel just from the standpoint of hunting, that are competitive sports shooters, that do clay events and other target practice events where they will compete all over the country. These individuals are transporting those firearms, and they're doing it legally and responsibly. So there's clear evidence that it's being done already. There shouldn't be this presumption that you just can't transport a gun in any way, shape, or form on any plane.
That's exactly right. And again, we're happy to make sure that your firearm is transported to your destination. And the whole point is to make sure it's transported safely.
Yes.
So even if you don't have any, intention to do anything nefarious on the plane, you don't know what the guy next to you might be thinking if they see it and make a grab for it. You don't know what would happen if you open your carry-on bag and the passenger near you sees it, or a member of the flight crew sees it, and that could cause a panic on a plane.
Of course.
And of course, we don't need that.
Are you confident that the system of holding people accountable is sufficient? First of all, explain what the process is. And is there any belief at the TSA that there are more powers that are necessary in order to slow this epidemic, as you say it is, down?
So what happens when a TSA officer detects a firearm in a carry-on bag? And let's say it's a backpack. So it is going through the TSA checkpoint x-ray machine. The TSA officer who's staffing the monitor of that x-ray machine will close down that lane. The conveyor belt comes to a stop. The backpack with the firearm in it stays in the x-ray machine. We notify the police. The police come to the checkpoint. And we have the police actually remove that backpack from the x-ray machine because we do not want our TSA officers handling firearms. Again, accident waiting to happen.
Right.
So then at that point, it really is up to the police whether somebody is issued a criminal citation, a summons to appear, or even arrested. And that comes down to the local laws and the local jurisdictions. Different parts of the country have different gun cultures, and sometimes you will be arrested, sometimes not. A lot of people are under the false assumption that because they have a firearm permit that they can bring it through, or because they are enrolled in the TSA pre-check program that they can bring it through. You know what? Wrong. Not the case. Not the case at all. Nobody should be carrying a firearm into the cabin of the plane. So TSA, though, we always have the ability to issue a federal civil citation, and that can run into the thousands of dollars. And we explain that information is also on our website, as is information on how to properly pack a firearm and ammunition for a flight. So if you do end up getting arrested, this is going to be a very, very expensive mistake. First of all, you're going to lose your firearm. The police are going to confiscate the gun. TSA doesn't confiscate it. The local law enforcement will confiscate it. And so you might not get your gun back. Well, that can cost you a lot of money. If you're arrested again, you're probably going to have to contact and hire a lawyer. That's going to cost you several $1,000s. And then to top it off, of course, TSA is going to issue a federal civil citation as well, which again, several $1,000s more. So don't be that guy. Just pack your firearm the right way or leave it at home.
Now, with all of that, even though we're continuing to see this epidemic, it seems as though maybe we need more reminders or more consequences for behavior that is dangerous to the flying public. Is it a situation to where maybe the fines need to be increased? I understand that there's a little bit of a grading on the fines from initial offense to other offenses. Do we need to put people and tell them, listen, you're not traveling today. Maybe you're not traveling, period. That if you bring a gun to an airport, maybe you should go on a no-fly list for a little while, and you get time out and you have an opportunity to learn your lesson. And if you need to get from A to B and flying would be more convenient, maybe you take a car. It seems as though we need to have more enforcement on this. I'd like to get your thoughts about that.
So, first of all, you touched on trying to do what we can to remind people the right way to travel with a firearm. And so if somebody's ever unsure if any item should be packed in a carry-on bag, a check bag, either or neither, there's so many ways to find out so conveniently. Our website, tsa.gov, you just type in firearms. It's got a great level of detail on how to pack your firearm and ammunition for a flight. You can download a free app. We have a free app called My TSA. It has that same handy feature as our website, and what can I bring? You click on what can I bring, type in gun, it'll tell you how to pack it. And you can ask us on Twitter or Facebook Messenger. We're very active on social media at Ask TSA. And travelers can send a question by texting the word travel to Ask TSA, which is 275872. So those are some quick ways to find out, where you should pack or how you should pack any item, of course, including your firearm and ammunition. In addition, there are signs at every checkpoint. Every single checkpoint has a sign that indicates that firearms are prohibited. Most airports have signage somewhere upon entry that also reminds you that you can't bring a firearm. when you purchase a flight online, there is a page that indicates what items are prohibited from being brought onto a plane. And yet, there's another indicator what the law is. It's interesting, I think, as well, to keep in mind that TSA has been in existence only since 9/11, so about 21 years. And this has been the case. You're not allowed to bring a firearm ever since TSA has been in existence. But guess what? It's been a regulation since before TSA ever existed. So it's been in a place for decades and decades. History tells you that there were many hijackings in the 1960s. And so at some point, along the way, there was a regulation that said you could not bring a firearm onto a plane as a result of that. So we're not talking about anything new.
Okay.
This is not something anybody snuck in when you weren't looking. This has been in place for decades and decades. And like you pointed out, it's pretty much a no-brainer. Why would you think you could bring your gun onto a plane? And the other thing is you asked about penalties. So if you are a member of the TSA pre-check program and you're caught with a firearm at the checkpoint, then you are suspended from the program. You're pretty much kicked out of the program. And that's a program that we call a trusted traveler program. That's when somebody has given us personal information about themselves, including their fingerprints, for us to do a background check and deem them trusted travelers, to be able to use a special checkpoint lane that allows them to leave on their shoes and their light outerwear jacket, and allows them to leave their electronics in their carry-on bag. So those folks should definitely know better,
right?
Because they're deemed trusted travelers. And yet, day after day, we do see people who are in the program who bring firearms, and they are then removed from the program.
Wow. It's remarkable that people will go through the process of getting that special clearance and then not be responsible and diligent. Maybe their primary focus was, I just want to cut the line, and I'm not necessarily somebody that can be trusted. I just don't want to stand in line with everybody else for as long as everyone else does. You mentioned the fines, and I see that the fines can be as high as $15,000. Could that be for a first offense, or is this a graduated fine structure? Can you give us some insights on how that works?
So the civil penalties, the financial penalties, have to do with what type of weapon. So if somebody brings an explosive device, that's going to be way up there. But for firearms, it's usually in a several $1,000s range. But what actually goes into that decision-making process? Well, was this the first time somebody's tried this? Is it the second or third time? And I can tell you, it's very rare somebody does this more than once. Was the gun loaded or was it not loaded? Was there a bullet in the chamber? Was there not a bullet in the chamber? Or was the individual cooperative at the checkpoint or disruptive to the entire checkpoint process? Again, keep in mind that once that lane comes to a stop so the police officer can arrive and remove the offending carry-on bag with a firearm in it, then everybody else in that line is standing there waiting. Everybody else is there waiting for the checkpoint to resume operation, or they're told to shift to another lane, thus making another lane the line in the next lane even longer. So it is not only inconvenient, clearly, to the individual who is caught with a gun, but everybody else behind them is also impacted.
When it comes to the idea of the individual not being able to go through TSA checkpoints, an individual who brings a gun to a checkpoint, will they be able to continue on with their travels potentially if they're not arrested? If all they're facing is the civil fine, will they be able to then go ahead and board the plane and travel wherever they were intending to go at that time?
Well, indeed, that depends on the jurisdiction. And in many areas of the country that have different gun cultures, those individuals are indeed permitted to catch their flight if there's enough time. Of course, that's because they no longer have the gun in their possession, so the threat is no longer there. I see your point. If somebody is not permitted to fly that day or misses their flight, then in theory, they're going to have to tell people why. Hey, I missed that business meeting. Sorry, I didn't make it to the wedding. Sorry, I didn't make it to the job interview. I couldn't catch my flight because I had my gun with me. But the importance there is for them to share that information with their family and friends and fellow gun owners so that others don't make the same mistake. The idea being, we really hope that others learn from that sort of an incident. So we, in hopes, we'll see fewer guns showing up at checkpoints, but we're not. We're just seeing more and more people bringing guns.
Well, my concern then is that we have a system in place that you exhaustively described of alerts and warnings and information that is posted online, special apps, phone numbers to call, signs all over the place. There's a tremendous amount of courtesy that is offered to individuals and their ability to continue on with their flights. It seems as though you're trying at the TSA to do this as politely as you can possibly do this. But if we're talking about something that is rising to the level of epidemic and there's no end in sight, isn't there more that needs to be done in order to clearly send the message home? And I think one of the things that you mentioned is a standout is that the idea of this happening to somebody more than once is extremely rare. And maybe some examples need to be made of individuals in order to really drive this message home to not only that person, because obviously they got the message after they got themselves in trouble, but to everybody else that is going to cause major disruptions in your life way more than just needing to stroke a check for a certain amount of money.
I think that something that you make, first of all, a very good point. And what we are seeing as well is, as I sort of touched on, is that it has to do with gun cultures in different jurisdictions, different counties in certain states, or different states in general. So the airport that we have seen repeatedly have the most guns caught at their checkpoints is in Atlanta, Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Last year alone, of the more than 6,000 guns TSA stopped at checkpoints, Hartsfield-Jackson International in Atlanta saw 448 guns caught. So you have to put that in perspective. There's an open carry law there. And starting July, earlier this month, the state of Florida also implemented a local open carry law. So we are concerned that we're going to now see a spike in Miami. And I can tell you that there are already plenty of guns that show up at airports in Florida. We see most guns in, again, areas that have more liberal gun cultures. And so, yeah, you're talking about airports in Texas, Dallas, Houston, and we already see lots of guns in Florida, Fort Lauderdale, Tampa, Miami, and other areas of the country as well. You don't see as many. You might think, for example, that JFK Airport, we screen approximately 100,000 people a day. 100,000 people a day come through our checkpoints there. Mm-hmm. And you might think, wow, I bet you they get a lot of guns. But they don't, because the gun culture in New York is very different than the gun culture in some other areas of the country. Right. And people in that area who live there know that.
When it comes to what TSA can do, granted, you don't arrest people, you don't confiscate the firearms. That's done by local law enforcement and to whatever extent they want to enforce whatever laws. But from a TSA standpoint, would it benefit you in having more powers to be able to prohibit people from flying? Maybe not on that particular day only, but if you bring a gun on a plane, you're going to be on a no-fly list where you're not flying anywhere for the next 3, 6, graduated up to years if you continue to engage in this kind of behavior. Is that something that would benefit the TSA and the safety of all airline travelers? And would that require some aspect of act from Congress or a regulation that would be imposed? How would that work?
Again, people can travel with their firearms. We just ask that they pack them properly.
Yes.
Also, the no-fly list is not built by TSA. That is another federal agency, FBI, has the authority to put people on the no-fly list. It's basically their list, and we sort of borrow the list for people who are flying. But the idea for a no-fly list is that that's for individuals who we believe have terrorist connections.
Yes.
The vast majority of the people who are showing up at our airports with their guns tell us that they forgot they had it with them and they have really no criminal intent. I can't tell you what I threw in my handbag 2 weeks ago. But I can tell you, before I go on a flight, I go through my handbag and make sure there's nothing in there that could be prohibited, whether that's a little penknife. I even remove all my pocket change because I don't want the extra weight in my handbag. So you just really have to know what is in your carry-on bag. You know what? Don't bring the duffel bag that you take to the shooting range with you to the airport. That's not the one. It might have an empty gun magazine or a loaded gun magazine. It might have an extra bullet in it, and that's going to jam you up at the checkpoint as well.
Right.
The best advice is when you're taking your carry-on bags to the airport is when you're packing them, first empty them. Start with an empty bag when you're packing, because there are so many zippered pockets and Velcro pockets that you might forget that there's something in there. So it's the best advice, best guidance is to start with an empty bag. Mm-hmm.
Well said. And also this idea that people carry these firearms in varying capacities, whether it's a book bag or carry-on, purses or whatever, and they do all of this with the presumption of, especially in more liberal gun carry states, with the idea that, well, I need to be able to have this to protect myself. How are you protecting yourself if you don't even know you have it?
So many people tell us that they forgot they had guns with them, and well, guess that good thing there's no emergency, or they wouldn't know where their gun was. So that's kind of an interesting excuse that they give. The second most common excuse is that my husband packed my bag or my wife packed my bag, and I can tell you that none of those excuses fly.
Oh my goodness! Nothing like throwing the spouse under the bus.
We do see a lot of that.
Oh yes. Like to see them at marriage counseling, too. Lisa Farbstein joining us, TSA spokeswoman on Mangino Talks. So, Lisa, thank you very much for your time. Do appreciate this.
All righty. Thanks a lot, and be sure to travel safely.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for listening to Mangino Talks. Please be sure to click the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. For more on me and the show, be sure to visit manginotalks.com. If there's a topic that you would like me to discuss or a guest that you would like me to have on, send me an email, mangino@manginotalks.com. Follow me on your favorite social media platform by using @ManginoTalks. And then once you find me, please like, follow, subscribe, and share the pages with your friends and your family. Thanks again for listening to the Mangino Talks podcast.